And Carl, I'll just start with you for opening remarks, and let's limit them to about 4 minutes, and then we'll start with questions from the floor, and then you'll all have a chance to make a closing statement at the end.
I'm not really great at keeping time, so if I go too long,
I'll go ahead and keep time for you, and when I stand up, that's when it's about right.
You've gone too long.
That's the shepherd's hook.
The
Okay.
hook might come. My name is Carl Maughan. I'm running for judge in Division 3 against a gentleman by the name of Greg Keith. You know, the first question people ask me is, why are you running? And I'll tell you, quite honestly, I didn't start out wanting to run for judge. I was going to run for state senate. I had some folks come to me and say that they had some concerns about the judicial seat. The district that I was going to run for state senate in was the 27th, and there are a couple of good conservatives already running there. And so when folks came to me and said, we've already got some good conservatives over here, but we don't have any in this Division 3 seat for the judiciary, where you consider running. And initially I said no. After a while, after they prevailed on me, I said, look, I promise you I'll give it some thought and prayer. And I did, and really based on that, after really giving it some prayer and thought and real consideration, it made sense to me to switch over to the judicial race. So the next question is, well, why did you want to run for public office? And you know, there's a story that most of you have heard. Ronald Reagan used to tell it about a gentleman from Cuba who was meeting with some business leaders, and you know, he was telling them about his flight from Cuba and how he got to the U.S. And at the end of it, one of the businessmen turned to the other and said, you know, we don't know how lucky we have, how lucky we are, how good we have it. And the gentleman from Cuba turned around and said, how lucky you are. At least I had somewhere to run to. And you know, that has been something. I was born in Zimbabwe in or what used to be Rhodesia, basically a hot spot in the Cold War, where, you know, in the midst of a communist insurgency, civil war. And so I grew up with America on the one side and communism on the other side. So I grew up with this great, you know, it's cliched, but Ronald Reagan described this country as a shining city on a hill. And that's how I grew up, you know, looking at America as a shining city on a hill. So that story about the gentleman fleeing from Cuba, it kind of resonates with me. Not because of what he had to run from, but because of what he had to run to. And if we don't have anywhere else to run to, and we don't, this is it. This is the last stand on earth, as Ronald Reagan said. If we don't have anywhere else to run to, what happens? We're done. I've seen, since I've arrived, America in decline, unfortunately. I've seen the state in decline, unfortunately. I attribute that to the fact that we no longer stand tall for our founding principles. We no longer stand tall for the Constitution. We just let it drift. Okay, we'll just make little changes here and there. And that's, you know, it doesn't work that way. There's a system for changing the Constitution if you want to, and it doesn't have anything to do with a bunch of judges saying, we believe this is what the intent may have been. So when I started thinking about what we're losing something to run to. I decided to run for public office because I always want there to be something to run to. We're not perfect, but the ideals are perfect. The ideals, the founding principles, are things that we can always run to. And that's why I decided to run for public office. And the question of whether or not that is applicable to the judicial race as a legislative race bothered me for a little bit. But after a while, I really believe it's more applicable to the judicial race. The judges are the ones who hold the line. And so I'd appreciate your vote on August 2nd.
That's right. Perfect time. Yeah, come on over. You can scoot.
No, I'm good. I've got room here.
Give me more room.
Good evening. I'm Linda Kirby. I am running in Division 14. And I don't imagine that any of you in here expect to be in front of a judge in the next few years. So you're not judge shopping for yourself. What I think you're probably doing is being the guardians of our judicial system. I strongly believe that every time a citizen is treated poorly, when someone does not read a brief, a judge does not read a brief, when a judge makes a decision without understanding the law, that citizen's rights are violated. And when that citizen's rights are violated, all of our rights are violated, and our judiciary erodes step by step, piece by piece. And I chose to run against Patrick Walters. But I also want you to know why I'm the best choice and was from the beginning, all right? I think what a judge has to bring to the court is an ability to understand the law. I'm going to go through a brief synopsis of my education and experience, just so you will know I can handle the complex material. I have an undergraduate degree in English, a master's degree in public administration. I graduated from law school cum laude. While I was in law school, I worked for the Chief Justice of the Oklahoma Supreme Court and learned from the top down how judges are to make decisions. After law school, I went to NYU Tax, where not only do you study tax, but you have to study business and individual income tax and understand how our nation gathers its money and income. I was in a strange place because I was in New York. It's the world's top tax school. I was a conservative woman from Kansas, and they were not. 98% of my class was men, and almost all of them were extremely liberal. So it gave me an opportunity to test my values, test my grit, and develop some really good conversations and debates about tax policy. From there, I went to teach law school. I taught upper division classes at the University of Richmond. Those classes were estate planning, tax law, and tax policy, among other things. So I am able to understand complex material. I have argued at every level of the U.S. and the state court system, including the U.S. Supreme Court. I understand how the court works. But I have to tell you, that's not what's important about what I do. For 29 years, I have sat across the table from citizens who have real problems. They have needs with their families in domestic matters. The domestic matters make up about 24% of our caseload in the court. They matter. Families are in crisis, and what's going on in those divorce courts matters. I sat across the table from clients who were in real estate or contract matters. Those are civil matters. That makes up about 34% of the caseloads that our courts handle. I understand from the citizen's point of view how to have that they have conflicts with one another. This is not a situation where the citizen is being charged with a crime. This is where citizens bring claims against one another, and they have equal rights, and they deserve equal respect. Because of the work that I have done, I also have had to deal with cases involving criminal matters. Sometimes children or even clients themselves will get into a situation. I deal regularly with probate cases. We have an aging population in Wichita. Thank you very much. I would appreciate your vote, and thank you.
All right. Didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right. That's what it was for.
You can finish your sentence. If I stand up in the middle of a sentence,
Okay.
you can finish your sentence.
My name is Quentin Pittman. I am running for Division 21. Mark, thank you very much for the invitation.
You're welcome.
And thanks to everybody for coming here. I've been an attorney since 2002. A little bit about me. I'm married. My wife Stephanie's here. We have 4 children. We attend church at St. Catherine of Siena Catholic Church. I'm in the Knights of Columbus. I am a member of the NRA, a member of the KSRA. I am a member of Kansans for Life. I am the only endorsed candidate in my race who is endorsed by Kansans for Life. Character matters in any election, but definitely matters in my election. It's incredibly important, and I have the character. Ideology also is important. You've heard the other two candidates talk about it, and I'll tell you this. The two tenets that form the foundation of my judicial philosophy, very simple. First is, law-abiding citizens should be left alone by their government. The second is that the law, the Constitution, exists to be followed, not to be interpreted. Carl talked about it, Linda talked about it. Absolutely, there is nothing in my mind that changes that. And what that means is that if the people want to change the law, there's a way to do it. Let the people change it. A judge should not be making law or changing the law in the state of Kansas. And I am absolutely 100% on that. So, character counts, ideology counts, experience counts. Anyone who practices law or is a judge in Sedgwick County District Court will be expected to know the law and to be able to preside over civil, criminal, family law, probate, juvenile, and traffic cases. I do that every day. I have done this for about 14 years. I've represented 4,000 to 5,000 citizens of Sedgwick County. I have the most experience of anybody in my race. I have the most jury trial experience of anybody in my race. And the joke that I tell people is, if you're on a plane, you get about 5,000 feet in the air. What you don't want is the captain to come on and say, now what? And that's exactly what you don't want in a trial. So I have the jury trial experience. I have the trial experience. I have the experience. I have the ideology. I have the character. And although I don't have the endorsement of the liberal Wichita Eagle, I would tell you that if you read that article, my peers ranked me as the highest candidate in my race compared to the other two candidates. So I have the experience, I have the ability, I have the ideology, and I have character. And those are four things not found with my other two opponents. And I would appreciate your vote.
All right, well, thank you. Let's give them a hand. These are good people. I'm going to do something a little different here. We still have a minute left. Quentin and Linda, I'm going to be unfair to you because you're already endorsed, but I want Carl and Quentin to give a fair assessment, about 30 seconds or a minute, of your opponent, and or opponents in your case, and then if there's someone in the room that would like to speak for Dewey or Jim or one of the other people that are not here, we would like to just know who we're running against, and then it'll settle on your mind when you're answering questions and so on. Is this person going to be better than the other choices? So anyway, I don't want you to paint a bad picture of them. I want you to paint an honest picture of them. Carl, can you be first to go for about a minute here?
Sure, absolutely. My opponent is Greg Keith. He's a nice guy. We're friends in the way that we're friendly. We don't hang out at each other's house, and maybe after this race, that'd be less likely. But we are. He's a gentleman in every sense of the word, and has a good demeanor. Greg has been a municipal court judge for the last, I think he says 20 years. I don't know his whole resume. In several small towns around Wichita. So he has been hearing traffic cases and petty misdemeanor criminal cases in courts that are not courts of record for the last several years. So he does have some judicial experience, which I don't have. What I do have is the trial experience in complex cases in jury trials. I'm not going to talk for his resume. I don't know how many trials he's done or hasn't done, but he is you know, the thing that you ought to consider, when, in all fairness, when considering Mr. Keith, is that he does have judicial experience. He does sit on a bench in municipal courts and in city courts and rule on cases. I have no trouble with Mr. Keith's demeanor, as far as being the judicial demeanor, which is important, and but I don't know all the ins and outs of his resume, but was that?
Well, thank you. You've done exactly what I wanted you to do, so thank you. Go ahead, and you get 2 minutes.
Robert Hollebeck, super nice guy. Bob primarily does misdemeanors. He does some immigration law. Jeff Dewey primarily does bankruptcy and does a lot of family law. I know that during this campaign, Mr. Dewey has touted that he does a lot for the community. And my take on that has been pretty simple, which is the apex of hypocrisy is doing something for somebody else so you can get credit for it and get a vote. And as I've said, when I'm serving dinner at the Lord's Diner, I'm not down there snapping a selfie of myself so I can put it on Facebook. I do it because my goal is to help the community, not because I'm trying to get your vote. But that's something that he's touted. You know, I think that a valid candidate doesn't need to stand on the shortcomings or alleged shortcomings of his opponents. And so, you know, frankly, they should be here, and they're not here, so I have nothing to say about them.
Okay, fair enough. You got both of them in under 50 seconds. I like this guy. He's got short, concise answers. So far, so good. So, okay, all right. At this point, we open it up to moderated questions from the floor. And it looks like Art has the first question. I would ask that when you ask your question, please think if you want to direct it to all three or to a specific candidate. And especially if it's a follow-on, you know, you can direct it to a specific one to save time. And we are going to try to get out of here right at about 8:15. So if we can, I want to have everybody get a chance to get all their questions in. So be concise, don't make statements, ask questions, fire away, Art.
Okay. My question is not as long and complicated. No, I'm just kidding. Do you perceive that there's a difference in the definitions of our language at the time of our founding fathers compared to the definitions of the same terminology used today?
Did everybody hear the question? Okay, I'll try to paraphrase it. Art, correct me if I'm wrong. Art notes that the definitions of certain terms and terminology are different today than what they may have been in the 1700s. And he's asking that, of course, referencing the Constitution. And so he's wanting to know about the meaning of the Constitution and has it changed. Am I doing about right? Okay.
I stood up because I wanted to talk first. I think the Constitution is our source document. The words have not changed. There is no doubt our culture has changed, but to the extent that we can continue to apply those words to our lives, they give us stability and certainty. So, do the definitions change only if a judge who is legislating decides to change them?
Carl?
You know, this very question, Justice Scalia had talked one day about words have meaning, and he said that the meanings of those words do not change. And I read this scathing article that went in about, of course, the meaning of words change. But the point is, yes, the meaning of the words change over time as we use them in common vernacular. But the meaning of the words at the time that they were used in the founding documents does not change. The intent behind those words was what the founders intended it to be. Yes, the words change over time. The meaning of the words change over time. But time doesn't change what the founders meant them to mean and what the founders believed them to mean. And that's what they mean. The fact that we use certain words today does not in a different way does not change the intent of the founders when they wrote that word in the Constitution. Does that answer your question?
And I agree. I think that it's a slippery slope. It's very dangerous to have a judge who can tell you that they think that they know better, perhaps, than those original people. I don't think that it changes, and I think you have to stick to the black and white letter of it. Otherwise, what we have is what we've gotten in Kansas lately, which is a lot of interpretation.
Go ahead. Well, actually, you are a veteran, and I'm going to let you go first in front of James. So, and for leading the pledge, you get the next question. Go ahead. You know what? The ice machine over here that they're working on has just been terrible. I sent someone to stop the noise here. Come up closer to me. I have a good voice, and I'll come up closer to me so I can hear it, because I did not get your question.
In respect to the word illegal, we were talking about our language. How does that affect immigration as we know it today?
Okay, in respect to the word illegal, how does that apply to today's situation with immigration? Okay, and I'll let you go first this time. Go ahead, Quentin.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I think it's simple. Illegal and immigration, illegal immigration. I mean, my take on that is fairly simple, which is we have laws in place. The real problem is we don't enforce them. And so we need to enforce those laws. If somebody, and when I mean somebody, I mean the people, want us to do something different, let the people change the laws. But we need to be enforcing the laws that exist. And unfortunately, I don't think that we do that.
And how are you, as a judge, going to, you say you're going to enforce the law, and it is illegal, and how are you going to do?
Well, what I would tell you would be this. To the extent that we would, I can't tell you how I'd rule in any particular case. So I can't say, well, in an illegal immigration case, I would do this. What I will tell you is this. I will enforce the law that is in place that without interpretation. Whatever that law is, that is the law that is going to go into place. I am not going to theorize and try and make wiggle room to do something different. Whatever the law is, that's what we're going to do, period.
Quentin's hitting on a problem, and that is often we think judges enforce the law. They do not. That is for the executive branch and for law enforcement. Judges, as he has said, only decide what comes before them. And I have to agree that our duty as judges is to enforce the law on the books until it is changed by the legislature.
So the question of the word illegal. Illegal has two different meanings. One, criminal, and secondly, unlawful. All right? So when we're talking about illegal immigration, there's two things. One, was it unlawful, meaning did you cross the border criminal? Did you cross the border in violation of a criminal law? That's one thing that is more a federal question than it is a state judicial question, because the states don't enforce federal law. However, unlawful is a status question. Are you here unlawfully? Meaning, are you outside the law? Have you been, are you overstaying a visa even though you entered illegally? That's a different question. I am an immigrant, and so this question is personal to me because it took a lot of time, effort, and angst and difficulty to get to where I am. All right. The day I stood up and took my oath to the Constitution was one of the proudest days of my life, and and even though this is a federal question, I do not take kindly to folks who circumvent the the system and come here illegally. And I'll tell you that I have serious questions about whether a judge can grant probation to an illegal alien, somebody who is here unlawfully, because generally probation requires, one of the elements is that you do not violate any laws, or you follow all the laws of the United States, state of Kansas, and every other jurisdiction. So I have some serious questions about whether or not we can grant probation. And I also have some questions about whether we have a duty to report that to the Immigration Service. So as far as illegal immigration goes, I will not, this is not something that generally falls under our purview, but it is certainly something that will come into my mind in criminal cases that are before me, when that is an aspect of sentencing, or in other aspects of the law, because there are areas when we are trying to, whether it's criminal, family, whatever else, we have to look at the totality of the circumstances sometimes. And if those totality of the circumstances will include the fact that this gentleman or lady is an illegal immigrant and has violated our laws, that has to be taken into account. And I'm not going to say how I would take into account, because obviously there are other factors that may weigh into that, but it has to be taken into account, whether or not you care enough about the laws of the United States and the state of Kansas to be here legally. And so I appreciate the questions.
Very good.
James Kilpatrick is next, if you don't mind. And then you're next after James.
Yeah, my question has to do with case law. I think we all agree on the Constitution, all agree on the original intent. The case law has changed the original intent. So how is that going to impact your decisions? You're going to go with the original intent of the law, or are you going to go with case law?
It's a good question.
Well, and
Would you,
Linda, you go.
Linda, you want to start?
Sure. I'd love to talk about it.
Okay, all right.
I'd love to talk about it. You know that judges are required to follow decisions in their jurisdiction that have dealt with that issue before, unless they can distinguish it and then make a decision based on principle. And what you've brought up is something is unconstitutional, and the judge has looked at it. Unless there has been a determination by the court, how do I say this? You can look at it and make a determination on it having to do with what you believe is right. Now, if there has been already a decision whether something was constitutional or not, we are bound by the Supreme Court rules. We are. In the general philosophy of that, I have to say, Jim taught me something a couple of years ago. It was about jury nullification. I had no idea what it was. And he educated me, and I continue to be educated as I come to these forums and I meet people who are intelligent and thoughtful questions. But as a judge, we are having to balance the decisions that were made before us, again, to give stability and certainty to decisions, and what we believe our Constitution of the United States and Constitution of our state say. And it's a case-by-case decision.
Carl, go ahead.
Sure. You know, frankly, Linda and I are in somewhat disagreement, and I know there's a camera and this may get me in trouble, but it's okay, because I'm going to say what I believe in. All right. My oath of citizenship was to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. My oath as a lawyer was similar. My oath as a judge will be similar. My oath as a judge will not have any language in it about following the prior opinions of other judges. Okay? I see my role and my oath as to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the United States and the state of Kansas. Now, having said that, prior opinions are important. You need to consider those in deciding what is the appropriateness of a constitutional provision, because there is a lot of wisdom there. But I'll tell you, if we simply abdicate our responsibility to the Constitution and simply say, well, the Supreme Court has spoken on this, Dred Scott would still be good law, we will never move the ball forward, or we will never move back towards an original intent of the Constitution unless we're willing to have the courage to challenge the opinions of other judges who have come before us. And I think it is healthy for trial court judges to stand up and say, look, my understanding of the Constitution, my reading of the Constitution is different from the other judges. I recognize the other judge's decision, but I am going to apply my oath, which is to uphold my understanding of the Constitution. Now, the rule of law is important. Okay, so when a judge, a superior judge, comes down and says, I've considered your opinion, I've ruled against you, and now I'm remanding the case with directions that you do X, Y, Z. The rule of law will then require me to be duty-bound to follow the directions of the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals. But when that case is before me, I will look at the Constitution, the law, and the prior opinions, and I will take that into account in trying to figure out what is the original intent of this law or Constitution, and how does it apply here in this case. All cases are fact-specific, and I will not apply as a knee-jerk reaction the opinions of another judge in a different case where the facts were different to the case before me. I will look at that in an individual basis. And when I say Linda and I differ, I differ with most of the bar. All right, 90% of the attorneys and judges out there would be aghast if they heard me say this. All right, and I understand that, but that is my understanding of the oath that I will take if I'm an elected judge.
Very good. Thank you, Carl.
Well, I don't think Linda and Carl actually disagree that much.
No.
I think I know Linda, and I'll just tell you that I know that Linda is a strict constructionalist when it comes to the Constitution. So I will say this, as for me, I'm not going to hit on the same topics. I'll just say that I have and owe no allegiance to any other judges previously in this state. My allegiance is to the citizens of Sedgwick County, and my job is to follow the Constitution for them, period.
Okay, the young lady up front here has the next question.
Oh, you probably don't have the answer. I mean, but she put it like that.
You may be
but
right.
I'm sitting here thinking,
No question.
we've got people that are from other countries, immigrants, and I don't know, they're out working among us. They're in laundry places and things, and hotels and other places. I met a guy, he was from Russia. He worked in this hotel, and he said he was we could speak a little bit of English back and forth, a little understanding there. And he said he was over in his country, and he was living here. He was trying to get his green card so he could stay, but he was working at this laundromat. In fact, this hotel had several people from these other countries. I don't know if they were all from Russia or other parts, but some could speak English a little better than others.
Okay, so what's the
for
question?
understanding. But I'm wondering, my question was in the back of my mind when I met the guy, is how does he get to stay here and work in our country and working at job, there's somebody else that's needing a job too here in this country, and he's working it.
Did everybody hear the question?
I don't know if it really is a question. But
Well, I can put it into a question. How does an illegal immigrant who has yet to get their status legalized of being here, what is their legal justification for being here while they're waiting for that to happen?
Well, I have, being an immigrant, I've really kind of, before I was a legal resident, I really kind of studied this because I tried to figure out how do I get here. But so the scenario you put out, where he says I'm working while I'm applying for my green card.
He's trying to say he was trying to get his green card. I question in the back of my mind is when he was telling me this is how is he even working in this laundromat from another country.
Sure. There's a number of different ways. So he may actually be legal to work. He may have a work permit. Okay, so he may be here on a number of different visas that allow him to work. So I don't want to get into the specifics of that gentleman because, you know, let's give him the benefit of the doubt that he was here legally and working with a work permit. But the reality is that lots of different companies are quite happy to have illegal immigrants work because they don't have to pay the employment tax, or the social security tax, the Medicare tax. So they're quite happy to have illegal immigrants and pay them under the table. And the problem is that we have a law that is not being enforced, and this is not really something that's for us because we are state or seeking to be state judges, and immigration is a federal system, a federal problem. But the fact is that the law is being flaunted both by the illegal immigrants and the people who hire them, and we have law enforcement who, a lot of the time, not through their own desire, but because they've been told to by their political bosses, looking the other way. And that's the problem. It's a lack of enforcement of the law. And, you know, we're a judicial forum, so I'll turn it around to a judicial candidacy thing. As judge, I will sit on the bench and will do my utmost to uphold the law of the United States and the state of Kansas. You know, we can't change everything. We can't change the fact that Obama orders Bureau of Immigration citizenship to look the other way. But what we can do is we can uphold the law when it is in front of us.
Yeah, can you ask a question?
Sure.
Hold on, let's let the others.
Get this straight in my mind here. How did he get? I heard of that before that they can get a worker's permit. How did they do that?
And
I mean, how is that legal?
I'll answer that real quick, Mark. I do have a little.
Yeah,
so-
we want to be
Very
fair and
quick.
let the other two answer the
It's-
same question.
Okay,
We want our question to be answered. If we
But
can
the
do
answer to your
it.
question is he may be
You
a
just want to say,
student,
I agree with him.
and when he's a student, he can get a work permit, or he may be here with a specific work visa where he came in being allowed to work. The facts are important in a case like that.
And all I can do is agree with Carl that the failure is in enforcement, which is part of the executive branch. Okay.
And I agree. And one of the other problems that we have is that we, no longer make benefits and a priority for Americans. We want to save and help everybody else.
Well,
We should be focusing on Americans.
right, and it occurred to me when I was talking to him that he's telling me he's from there, and at the same time, there was a person from China that had come here and had come under the grounds of religious persecution, and they made it legal.
Maybe he was here on an asylum type
No,
case.
he came over here, his father sent him from China, and he flew over here on vacation, and I don't know if he went to the embassy or where.
I used to work at the embassy as a Marine Guard, so I know all about the asylum issues. But anyway, we have so many other people have a question, and we're running short on time. So
Yeah.
let me go ahead and take the next question. We had some back here. Do we have? Go ahead, sir.
Sure, just transgender things that are coming up in
Mhm.
DC and North Carolina and so on.
Right.
Where do you stand on that?
Okay. Where do you stand on transgender issues? You know what? Let's let Quentin go first here. He hasn't had a first shot at many of them. Go ahead, and then Linda, and then Carl.
It is absolutely ridiculous that you are allowed to, today I feel like a woman, tomorrow I feel like a Native American, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At some point, this is ridiculous. And here's the thing, not only is it ridiculous, it's putting, I believe, not only our children, but, people at risk. Because frankly, the people who are going to take advantage of it, as we have seen since this has happened, sex offenders. Yeah, they're going into the other bathrooms. And there have been a number of arrests across the country. So, it's just crazy. Fiddle faddle. Yeah, crazy.
Fiddle faddle.
Fiddle faddle, that's
I
a
like that.
legal
Fiddle
term.
faddle. My personal views on it, I have to say, mirror what Quentin's saying. But I have to say that we have a canon that says we are not supposed to engage in conversations and Quentin did not. I mean, I respect him for that. About what should be done about that. That's a legislative issue. And so while we can have opinions and in our private lives be involved with that, we are truly supposed to refrain from suggesting solutions to that ahead of time. And it's a constraint because you can tell up here we all have some strong political opinions. But I have to say, and I hope you all understand, that, and help us not have to address those legislative issues and keep with our canons.
Carl?
Far be it from me to really understand the struggles of somebody who is going through these problems, right? There is something going on in a truly transgender or truly somebody who believes they are separate sex. There's something going on there that I'm not qualified to understand. But the fact remains that we simply cannot, and I'll talk about it from a judicial aspect, you know, the fact is that you are a man or a woman. You don't get to just simply decide. When we start defining ourselves based on how we feel, we go down a slippery slope to the point where we can redefine anything. Okay, if I can redefine myself today as a woman, I can redefine pretty much anything I want. Okay, so then we get to the point where, and this is a silly example, but well, yes, I went outside and I urinated in public because today I self-identify as a dog. All right, it is one of these things that you simply have to say no. All right,
Right.
You are a man, you are a woman,
Yeah.
and now if the legislature decides to make all bathrooms multi-gender, you know, that's the legislature's problem. But it is an affront to what God gave us. It is an affront to common sense, and it is an affront to everything that just makes sense. I'm sorry. I just, you know, I do understand that people go through a lot of difficulties and you know, when they have these problems, and I'm not trying to make light of it. But the fact is that we cannot bend our laws to support your particular mental illness, if I could say that. And again, the camera's on, I'll probably get myself in trouble, but there is a problem there, and when you believe you are something that you are not, I would suggest that there's some mental illness there.
Okay. We have time for about 2 more questions, and I'm going to claim the last one. So, well, Art, you already had one. Do we have somebody else that has not had one? James, you had one here. Go ahead.
I guess any of the candidates, are you aware if any of your opponents have either identified as a Democrat or held themselves out to be a Democrat?
Well, this is the Republican primary, so that's a good question. Are any of you facing a Democrat opponent in the general? Just give me a show of hands if you are.
Not in the general, but I do have an answer to that.
Okay. I don't think we have. If you win the primary, you're in, right?
Do we believe that we're facing a Democrat in the primary, though? Is that the better question?
Ever been registered as a Democrat or identified?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't understand the question. You understand his question that he's talking about the rhino issue. Someone who's running as a Republican who might be a Republican in name only, but is actually a person who's been a Democrat in the past. Is that the question? Okay, very good.
Okay. Yeah, I do have an answer to that. To the best of my understanding, and this is what would be public record, Greg Keith was a Democrat until about 4 years ago when he first decided to start thinking about running for judge, and he switched parties. And that's because, thankfully, we haven't had a Democrat non-incumbent elected as judge for many, many years. And so, as far as I can tell, Mr. Keith switched parties 4 or 5 years ago when he first started thinking about running for judge. The interesting thing is even though he's running as a Republican, none of his materials will hold himself out as a Republican. He won't even have the Republican elephant. And being from Africa, I love the elephant. Come on, put the elephant on there. But maybe he's had a conversion. But the fact is that 5 years ago he was a Democrat and doesn't hold himself out as a Republican in this race.
Very good.
As far as I know, my opponent, Patrick Walters, does not bear that affliction. He has others.
Okay.
I would concur with Linda.
Okay, very good. All right, in the interest of time here, I'm going to try to make this very concise, but it's going to kind of overlap on the question we already had about case law. You are in a position where you're likely going to get into a case where a city is, most cities across the United States, I'm just learning this now because of a case that we have going on with the abortion clinic and the First Amendment. There has been numerous Supreme Court cases on First Amendment rights. Years ago, they were always about labor disputes and what the people could do that were holding the signs or saying organize and so on. And then it's about immigration. Now it's about Black Lives Matter. And of course, the abortion issue has been in there for 40 years. The Supreme Court has made numerous case law decisions, narrowing it down to the finest tooth that you can imagine on what can and cannot be done. And right now the city of Wichita has an entire code book of sign ordinances, almost none of which comply with what the Supreme Court says case law is. And how in the world, if you were a judge and you have a sign ordinance or a county sign ordinance come before you, how in the world are you going to decide when you have got about 15 or 20 different case law First Amendment issues versus an obviously non-constitutional local regulation on signs? And I didn't realize it was such a big issue, but it's big and it's all over the United States. They're fighting it from sea to shining sea. Hardly a city that's not affected by it. So my question is, how do you, when you get into case law, how do you determine which one? You've got about 25 to choose from.
All right, I'll take it. You know, that's the problem with case law and with the principle of stare decisis. When we look at stare decisis, which is the principle that basically a judicially made up principle that says let the decision stand. The fact is that may have been fine in 1812 when there were few decisions, but we now have, I'm not even going to put a number on it, volumes and volumes of decisions. And so what happens is judges and attorneys cherry pick the decisions that they like and apply, and then try to apply them to the facts in their case. Prior decisions are important because they do give us, you know, you've got to be open-minded, you've got to look around, you've got to read this what others have decided. But ultimately, our duty is to uphold the Constitution, and the First Amendment being, you know, first for a reason. You know, we've got to uphold that. Frankly, in some of the, I'm not going to get case specific, but we have had situations in Wichita and Hayesville simply saying we're not going to follow state law on sign ordinances. Well, if you don't want to follow state law, there's a mechanism to do that, and that is a lawsuit to invalidate that law if you think it's unconstitutional. It's not simply to refuse to follow the law, which is what we have in Wichita and Hayesville. So, to the crux of Mark's question there, it is a problem. You have so many cases. So you distill them, you read them, and you decide, okay, what does the Constitution say? What does the law say, the statute? And what do these cases say? And then you try and apply it in a way that gives the original intent of the Constitution the greatest possible meaning. And it's a difficult thing to do, and it's easy to say, hey, this is how I do it, but that would be the roadmap that I would follow.
Thank you, Carl.
We got,
Go ahead, Art, we have an emergency, what do we have?
radar indicated storms heading our way, 80-mile-an-hour winds.
Oh, my.
Ice, and 2-inch hail.
Okay.
It's just northwest.
About 10 miles, 10 minutes off.
Oh, so
Is it
we'll
moving
wrap
this
this
way?
up.
I'll be really fast here. Judges aren't automatons. There will be decisions that will have to be appealed if someone doesn't like them. The appeal system works. If a judge makes a decision based on conscience or based on what she believes is constitutional, and it varies from decisions that have come down otherwise, and there are good, solid legal reasons to make those decisions, and she writes them clearly, giving a good foundation for an appeal, then those cases will go to appeal, and we will have a clearer explanation of the law for us.
Since its inception, since the Constitution's inception, there have been factions and, sadly, portions of the government that have worked to whittle away the rights that were created. And my position is simple. Again, I think you go back to the original Constitution, and that's what you have to follow. That's what you have to apply. There may be other cases, etc., but again, I think ultimately too much government, too many decisions is a bad thing, and you always look, as Carl has said, and Linda as well, to the Constitution for the answers. And it is reprehensible that these entities, like Hayesville and other places, don't want to follow the law, but yet they expect you to do that. So,
Okay. All right, well, let's give these candidates a round of applause. Before we go further here, Art, is that heading here? I don't want to.
Yes.
It is heading.
It's in an angle this way. It's right at the northwest edge.
I'm not hearing any tornado sirens. So, can we do this? I would like, for the voting members here, I'd like to entertain a motion to endorse the two other candidates who are not endorsed. So moved by Debbie Baker that we are going to endorse the two candidates that are here. Seconded by Art Gentry. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.